Hey everybody, Jake here from Bearded Gear, and I have a full review to do for you on a half-size knife. Not even half. This is the Spyderco Mcbee, and it was loaned to me for review by my buddy YD Knives. So as always, his Instagram will be linked in the description of the video down below, so you can check him out there. And this is one of those knives that I said in my first impressions, I've wanted to check one of these out for a long time. I've almost bought them at least once or twice, and it's just one of those intriguing little micro knives, right? I'm the kind of person who carries a secondary knife pretty much every day. Almost without fail, I have a secondary knife on me, unless I'm going somewhere super lightweight and I'm like in basketball shorts running to pick up dinner curbside real quick or something. Then I might just have like a lightweight primary on me. But usually, most days when I go out, I have a primary knife front right pocket, and I have a secondary knife either back left pocket or in waistband, or if I'm in jeans or something that has a fifth pocket, my knife is small enough, I'll put this in like the coin pocket, the fifth pocket of my pants. This knife is the smallest I've ever carried as a secondary. So it's been an interesting kind of exercise for me. I've had this in pocket a good amount of times at this point, and it's almost as functional as the majority of the secondary knives that I typically carry, which are bigger than it. I was surprised how functional I actually found this, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Because typically for a secondary knife, for me, I can get 3 fingers on it, usually. Sometimes 4 if I'm going kind of heavy, then maybe even like a pair of 3 is my secondary. But with even my smallest of secondary knives, I can get at least 3 fingers on them. This one's 2. And I always have more blade length than this. And so it's just been interesting to me to kind of take an exercise in how small can a knife get and still be functional. Because I found that this knife is still way more functional than I would have imagined it to be before using it. Is it the most functional knife? No, it is a tiny little thing. But the majority of cutting tasks I think that the average person is faced with in a typical, like normal person's daily life, is things like opening packages and maybe cutting a zip tie here and there. And like, there's nothing that crazy that most people are doing with their knives that require a lot of blade length. Are there a counter argument? A lot of things people do frequently that they do need more blade length for? Sure. But I'm just saying, in a typical day, if you're around the house or in the office or whatever, it's a little more rare that you're doing something that it's like you couldn't cut through what you need to cut with what is this, 1.5 inches of blade length? I mean, it's tiny. It's almost laughable. But for cutting open a package, this sucker works great. In fact, it's almost like kind of ideal for that, because you can just, the way that I find myself holding this when I'm cutting like tape and stuff is I have so much control over this tiny little thing where like I can just, it's almost like cutting something with a sharpened fingertip. Like, it feels really kind of intuitive the way that these grinds are cut on here, to just set your fingertip right up by the edge of that and just kind of like draw where you want your cut to be with your fingertip. It's kind of weirdly awesome. That being said, this knife is kind of expensive for how tiny it is. Now, it's made of premium materials. We've got a little titanium frame lock, right? And it's CTS XHP blade steel, and it's a decently thick blade stock. It's ground well. It's got a nice edge on it. The titanium is finished well. It's a Taichung Spyderco, which they tend to function well and not be all that cheap ever, in my experience. But the reality is, I think this is a Spyderco for people who already have a lot of Spydercos. Or somebody who's, maybe you're getting it as a gift for somebody who genuinely is just looking for a knife to open boxes with, and you want to get them something really nice and not just a box cutter or something. But it just, I don't know how much argument there really is for this. Like, if anybody was asking me, what knife should I get? This would never be the top one that I'd recommend, unless they have so many other knives that they're just looking for something quirky and different and fun, which a lot of us are at this point. I have plenty of knives at this point that I have because they're different and they excite me for whatever reason. So, would I be opposed to owning one of these? Not necessarily, but I think they cost like $140, and at that point you're talking like base para 3, which is so much more knife and is going to do everything this can do demonstrably and way more, because it has the size to actually fill your hand and a blade that's more realistic for doing more than this will. But if you're looking for a really tiny, really fun, quirky little knife that'll go in your coin pocket super comfortably, like, this is your guy. You know, like, it's cool for that reason. I find myself like I'm dancing with it, because as much as it's impressed me in how good it is at doing specific little things, I don't think I'd feel confident going anywhere with this as my only knife. And maybe some of that's in my head, but I mean, if something ever goes down and I need to use my knife to defend myself, this is not what I want in my hand. Most of my secondary knives, I wouldn't want to be the knife that I have in my hand. There's a reason why I typically only carry those as a secondary and not as a primary, but I don't know, just the idea of having something this small, I feel a little bit afraid that I'd be too limited with what I can do with it. So, as a secondary, knowing that I've got my primary with me, it's worked. It's been fine. It's a fun little conversation piece when you pull this out in front of people, and it's like the tiniest little pocket knife they've ever seen. And so there's certainly some fun to it, and I want to reiterate that. But I think there's also a certain part, at least for me, of collecting gear, where there's like probably an overboard sense of urgency to feel prepared. I imagine if you're watching this channel and you're into knives and gear in general, that you probably share at least some of that. Where if you really psychologically look at the hobby, a lot of it is dramatic over-preparedness. And this knife doesn't feel over-prepared. If it's part of your kit, then I think it's more acceptable. But most of the pieces of gear that I end up purchasing, to a certain degree, I feel like I expect a minimum requirement of functionality out of them, and I don't know that this necessarily meets my minimum level of functional requirement from a knife, just because it's such a short blade length. It's so tiny that what it can do is cut through like small soft materials, tape, envelopes, stuff like that. If this knife is on your desk for doing that kind of stuff, great. But as for like carrying it around with me, I don't know. I'm not totally sold on that idea. But at the end of the day, it is a fun little thing. I just realized I've hardly shown this to the camera, and some people are probably so mad at me for doing that, but get over it. Make your own YouTube channel and show the knife to the camera. It is a funky looking, pretty cool, tiny little knife. And I've really enjoyed feeling it out and trying it, and so I'm glad that I had this one as a loaner just to experience. One thing I will say is they should have definitely used a smaller pocket clip. It's already a smaller than normal Spyderco pocket clip, but when the clip is the same size as your whole scale, I don't know. I don't dig that. But overall, I think it looks pretty cool. It obviously carries super well. It's a tiny little thing. It's an easy knife to forget you have on you, even if it's like in my back pocket and I sit on it weird or something. Like with other knives, I'd notice it way more than I would with this one. It's just so tiny, so non-threatening, and that's kind of, I think this was just an exercise in like making a knife because they could. Not necessarily, like, there's no way when Spyderco and Mcbee's collaborated on this, they were like, let's make the perfect EDC. That's going to be exactly, like, perfectly useful for everybody to carry. No, this was an exercise in different. And it's fun because of that. And, yeah, I don't know. I don't know that I'll ever own one. Maybe I'll start seeing them real cheap on the secondary or something, and I'll get one because it's gimmicky and fun and different, and like, it would be fun for me to have one. But at $140, what they cost new, I don't see enough utility in it for myself to feel like I need one. But I guess that'll be that. This will be an interesting, quick little one. But this is the Spyderco Mcbee, designed by Mcbee's, and it is about the same size as a lot of these flies out here that are trying to get inside of my brain tonight. It is the tiniest knife that I ever have reviewed, and it may be the tiniest knife I ever review. Time will tell. So thanks for checking it out with me, and I will see you guys on the next one.